Newcastle have signed Sandro Tonali from AC Milan for a fee that makes him the most expensive Italian player in history. 70 million euros is a lot of spondulies. It's actually a big chunk of the total spondulies that Newcastle had to spend this summer because of financial fair play. And so, by the end of this video, I want to have explained why Tonali was Eddie Howe's #1 target, whether he makes the team better, or whether Newcastle may have overpaid for an overhyped player. Well, let's start with who he is. Sandro Tonali is a 23-year-old Italian international midfielder who won the league with AC Milan in 21-22 season and got to the semi-finals of the Champions League with AC Milan. This is what he does. And he can play as either one of two sixes here. He's a box-to-box kind of midfielder. He can also play as one of two eights if you move it like this. Again, box-to-box. And there are times where he'll move into this right half space where he can chuck in really good crosses to someone at the back post like this. Or if he's playing on the left of maybe two eights or two sixes like this, what happens if the left back goes forward and overlaps someone is he might drop into this left kind of space here where he can then hit long passes and try and distribute the ball that way. This is kind of interesting because for years people have thought Tonali is the new Andrea Pirlo playing in this sort of position here, but he doesn't really do that. And the reasons people have said he's the next Andrea Pirlo are numerous. 1, he looks a bit like Andrea Pirlo. 2, he also started his career at Brescia. And 3, he likes to ping passes around. That's what he does. And we can see here that he does like to switch the play. He likes to do these long range passes out to wide areas from a central kind of position. But there is a problem. He's not actually that good at it, because although Tonali attempts more long-range passes per 90 than all but 14% of his fellow Champions League midfielders, his accuracy is actually really low, because he's in the bottom 5th for accuracy, completing less than 50% of those passes, putting the ball out of play, something like that, or just giving it to the opposition. And this is one of the reasons why Newcastle don't want to use him as the single pivot as the number 6, because if you're making these ambitious kind of long passes, of course you might give the ball away to your opposition, which means they can counter-attack you, which makes games far more basketball-y and open end-to-end than you might want. And also, Bruno Guimaraes is just much better at it, and he will stay as the 6 for Newcastle. Tonali won't kind of play here. Because the thing with Tonali is he's not actually technically amazing, and his past coaches have said that. There's a piece in The Athletic where one of his old coaches said that technically he did not excel. His technique was good, don't get me wrong, but the tactical side of his game and physicality were his main strengths. And that is still the case, because as we can see from his FBref profile, he is very much a box-to-box midfielder. He's an all-action player, so he goes up and down the pitch, he makes tackles, he makes interceptions, he progresses play. That's what he does. And that's part of the reason that AC Milan fans like him so much. He looks like he's doing things all the time. He's a very busy player, and he's been compared more to someone like Gennaro Gattuso rather than Pirlo. Two midfielders from AC Milan, very different profiles. You can see he's like this. And Pirlo has said in the past that he's a very different kind of player, more complete in defensive and attacking, but obviously Pirlo was a special player. But he's also very clever with his physicality. He uses it at the right time in the right places. And you can see here are his tackles and interceptions in the Champions League last season, all over the pitch. As you can see, that's partly because he can play either side, but also because he does a lot of work off the ball. And a lot of it is him being part of a high press. So when, say, a team's playing it from the back, what he'll be part of often is timing a run to make sure he can put pressure on a player to force turnovers so that his team can then create from there. He's really busy out of possession. So like in contrast to Pirlo again, he's not one to kind of sit still and be in the middle of the pitch. He tends to carry it, as you can see here. This is his carries in the Champions League last season as well. You see again, lots on the left side, lots on the right as well. He does that an awful lot. And that's part of the appeal of Tonali. It looks like he's putting in a shift because he is, and he also gets stuck into players. He had 7 yellow cards last season for AC Milan in the league, and 9 yellow cards the season before that. So we know he has the engine and the work rate of a box-to-box midfielder. We know he likes to get stuck in, and the defensive numbers show that, because he had 1.9 tackles per game last season for AC Milan in the league, which puts him just below his midfield partner, Benacer. It puts him just below Calabria, the right back, and Fikayo Tomori, who's centre back. So 2 defenders and a player whose entire role in the team is to break up play. Tonali's right in amongst that with his numbers there. The point being, Eddie Howe doesn't want him for his creative playmaking or sitting deep and ping the ball around. He wants him for his brilliant work in transition and out of possession. That's what he's amazing at. So where does he fit into Newcastle's team now, and does he actually make them better? Well, we know that this is kind of what Newcastle look like, and we should look at how the midfield structure really works at the moment, because Guimaraes is going to be the number 6. We know that's what he's best at. Then you've got Joe Linton and Longstaff, or maybe Joe Willock can come in here. Now there's different profiles of player that you have here. Joe Willock is more kind of box to box, more of an advanced playmaker, can create things from here. Had a good XG last year as well. He scored 3 goals, for next year 7, so if he started taking his chances more often, he'd be a high goal scorer. That's really important. Joe Linton, the lovely Joe Linton, has become an excellent ball-winning midfielder, can also play wide as a pressing forward on the left. That's what you've got as your options here. And then of course you've got players like, well, that's what you've got. Holy, is that it? No wonder. So obviously you want to improve on this. Of course, Willett can play on the right side as well if you want, but they're lacking a bit of depth. We knew they wanted to get a midfielder in. So which of these two does Tonali replace, and why not Guimaraes? So what I can show you here is this lovely table from The Athletic, and this shows passes under pressure per 90 in the Premier League in 22-23, and that means a player making a pass with an opponent within 2 meters of him, so obviously quite close. You're under pressure. Now, Rodri is the best of that in the league, and his success here under pressure is very high. Guimaraes is second in that list, and so naturally you want to keep Guimaraes in that deep position because he's best at it. And so you want to replace him, you want to add around him to make that bit better. And then you've got Joe Willock, who profiles as more of an advanced playmaker, gets forward, can get in the box a lot more. Then you've got Joe Linton, who's that pressing, ball-winning midfielder, gets stuck in, you want that, is really useful, and he can play wide and help out with some goals also. And on the other side, you've got Sean Longstaff. We all love Sean Longstaff, but if you remember Sandro Tonali Stats here from FBref, we can compare him to the lovely Sean Longstaff, and what we see is basically Tonali is a luxury version of this player. Now, Longstaff has offered more of a goal threat statistically last season compared to Tonali, but it's obviously a different team, a different league, different shenanigans going on. But this is what you get. Tonali does a lot more of the same things that Longstaff needs to within the tactical systems. And so it's quite likely, very likely, that Longstaff will come out. He'll obviously play a big part in the season going forward. There are lots of games coming up, and Tonali will go in here where he can do those things, goes box to box, he can get into this right half space where he can put the crosses into the box and offer a full back cover, elbow back thing where he can go in here as Trippier goes up and overlaps. That's what you'll probably get from him in here. And of course on the left hand side, Joe Linton can play, or he can move it to this left bit if you want to get Joe Willock in as well. So you keep the midfield that worked very well and functioned last season for Newcastle, but also bring in a bit of Tonali magic. Because the data shows that Tonali created more big chances, 9, last season than anyone else in the Champions League, so that's really good. And his 2.1 key passes per 90 was only bettered by 4 central midfielders in Serie A last season. So he's very creative, you see. And so the data shows that he's a creative player. He can help you create chances in various different ways. But here's the thing. Science is a liar sometimes. As we can see from this lovely graph from the Opta analyst, the majority of his chances created or assists come from corners, because his creative numbers are hugely inflated by his set piece ability. Now he can play it from either side as a corner taker. He's assisted goals for Italy under 21s already, and the Italian national team actually, from corners. He's really good at taking corners, but Kieran Trippier takes corners. That's what he does for Newcastle. So his creative output is going to come down an awful lot, because you can see a lot of his passes, like these chances created, or a pass that starts here, goes to this guy, who then I assume runs forward and shoots. That's what counts as a chance created. So this is kind of what you get. He's not actually creating an awful lot from that final third, particularly from these half space positions where he'd normally be occupying when bursting forward. So, have Newcastle overpaid for an overhyped player? Well, I say no, because first of all, it's Newcastle, and other teams know or have a heavy suspicion that they might find an extra tenner down the sofa somewhere when they want to buy players. Therefore, they can ask for a higher price than you might get. Second, logistically and financially, it actually makes sense. He's 23, so the right age profile, and he should be reaching his peak very soon, which means that in a few years' time he still has high resale value, particularly if he turns out to be amazing. So that's something you can get with your future planning. You're gonna have him for a few years, he might be worth money when you sell him, you can sell him on. Also, the deal is structured in a way that they pay a lot of money up front, but then there are targets to meet. And of course, if they meet those targets, Newcastle will probably be quite pleased to pay the money anyway. 3, he has the mental attributes of a player that Eddie Howe really likes. He's very, very hard working, he's determined, he is a leader, he's captain the under-21s just now for Italy. By the time you watch this, might be over by then, but he's done that anyway. But basically that's what he's done. He's also got 14 caps for Italy already, he's played to a high level in Champions League, he has the right experience, but he does the same things as other midfielders do. Works hard, wins the ball back, has a total driven mental attitude. And finally, he just suits perfectly what Eddie Howe wants to do tactically. He's got players who can burst forward in the counter-attack and take advantage of transition, which is very useful for Newcastle, especially if they've got loads of teams sitting deep against them. When they finally do get a chance to counter-attack, you need that. He tries a lot of those ambitious long passes, but if they do come off, then suddenly you'll have a really useful outlet for someone like St. Maximin if you can hit these sort of passes here. We see he's very tactically intelligent, and Newcastle rely on their tactics an awful lot, because it's built around being intense, winning the ball back quickly, knocking the the ball out of play, of course. They don't play with the ball and play an awful lot of the time, but then they rely on their energy and intensity to try and force chances out of team. And sure enough, he's not going to give you Kevin De Bruyne moments. He's not going to do Andrea Pirlo stuff at the back. He's not that kind of player. He's an all-action, box-to-box midfielder who can work as one of their 2-8s, or possibly if they change the system a little bit, they can move into back to one of 2 6s next to Guimaraes with a 10 in front. They've done that maybe a few times with Isak playing that sort of role. They're going to have more tactical options, and he's played at a really high level. Won the league with AC Milan, so you know he's a winner. He's played the Champions League semi-final last season. He's that good. And so yes, he is the most expensive Italian player in history, but he's very good, and it could be a crucial part of Eddie Howe's Newcastle team for next season.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.